What is up? What about that girl right there? See her? That's Kamala. She's one of the dogs you saw in the intro. That's my best friend, Kamala, right there. Okay. Hi. Saturday afternoon. Look, 1 o'clock. Saturday afternoon. What are we? March 4th already? It's fucking nuts. 2023 just goes flying by. And I can promise you, as you get older, you experience that more and more and more. I'm 56. I don't know what it's going to be like when I'm 65. Is a year going to feel like 6 months? Because it sure as hell does right now. So what's going on, guys? Last time I was on, I wasn't feeling too good. I'll let you guys know that. And I just, that corona, it kicked my booty, man. It really did. But I am feeling better. Still got the little bit of sinus thing going on. I have some questions for you. What is going on here and here? Like, I got my hair greased down so hard right now, so you can't tell what a fucking crazy amount of hair I have. Like, I don't even have a bald spot. I mean, it might be looking a little thin in some spots. That's because of the product I have in it. And when I say product, I mean coconut oil. I literally just have coconut oil in my hair because I don't have any good product for my hair. I bought this pomade stuff. Fucking, not even, it wasn't pomade. What was it? Some kind of paste, some kind of white paste. Worst shit I ever put in my hair. It's like it's got clumps in it. I don't know how to do it. I tried getting it real good in my hands and mixing it all in there. Total garbage. So I'm either rocking it supernatural right now, or which looks insane, or right now we're trying out the coconut oil until I get to the store and get some proper hair product. And the Pixie will help me pick out something. But I think what we're doing is we're just going to let it get as big as it possibly can, both here and here. See what that looks like. Let's see. Couple things to note before we get started today. I guess we're already started. We're going to do some true crime, some more true crime, and some amazing internet stories today. Why? Because I'm going to tell you, if you've never done this before, pulling content together is no bullshit. It's no bullshit pulling content. Hi.
I know about stuff and things.
Come on in here. You want to do some true crime? You want to say hi to the people? Come on in. Come in. There's the Pixie right there. Yeah.
Hi.
Live. And we're gonna do some true crime and amazing internet stories and stuff. So if you feel like you want to come watch, you just come kick it with us. And if you don't, it's okay too.
Okay.
Either or both
I
of you.
wanted to crash your party.
You can always crash my party. Is she cute? She is the cutest. This month's going to be 12 years with that one. Can you believe that shit? 12 years. Isn't it like all the way through elementary school, primary, and like high school? That same amount of time? Holy shit. No one thought 12 years. We didn't think 12 years. Craziest 12 years. First, I don't know, 11, pretty nuts. Anyways, last year's been good. So anyways, here, what was I talking about? All right. Oh, I'm not, listen, I meant to tell you guys, what do we have now? It's crazy amount of subscribers that we have. I say that like there's fucking someone else here. I have, can you see it? 100 and, we can't see it. Let me see if I can do it. 143 subscribers. I started this a couple of months ago with 0. We're up to 143 subscribers now, and I am beyond disbelief with that. The goal is 1,000 subscribers. When we get to 1,000 subscribers, I can monetize. I would like to monetize. I've talked to you guys and mentioned that before. I would like to monetize. Why? Because why not? I'm going to give a shameless plug for something right now, even though I have no sponsorships and they do not know I exist. But let me tell you, the fucking, what is this? Lemon Liquid IV. Ooh, I'm really enjoying that. I'm enjoying the lemon lime liquid IV. Costco, baby. There's the plug, man. Liquid IV, Costco. Get at me for the sponsorships. I'm looking to augment our income around here. Shit's expensive. Have you seen the price of tofu lately? It's fucking off the hook. Anyways, let's start. We're gonna start a little true crime here. We're gonna watch, I think we're gonna try and get through 3 different, like 30-minute videos. Most of the videos have multiple stories in them. I'm gonna let some other people do the talking. I'm gonna react. If I got some people, boy, yeah, she not only did she show up, showing up in the chat. Love that. Showing up in life, showing up in the chat. That's what the Pixie does. If you're ever to have a friend like her, you're lucky. She shows up. I'm gonna tell you that right now. And I'm not just saying that because she bought donuts this morning. I'm not just saying that because she bought donuts. All right. So let's switch on over here to the old share screeneroo. I put look, I'm up here. I might be in the way. I put myself up here because I tried to like edit this shit and throw some stuff over to TikTok. And where I had a position, check it out, like down here, it literally landed exactly my face as I'm talking on one of the icons of my face, and it looked stupid. And you know what? Let's get this video going, and I'll pause it again. And to speak on something, how come I'm having mouse problems? There we are. Okay. Let's go. All right, I'm going to. Wait. Okay, we're going to stop there. Let's talk about TikTok for a minute. So I've been on social media a long time. I had a pretty decent following on like Facebook, Instagram, and I say decent, I don't mean big, just like local good size following. And about a year ago, I decided to get on the old TikTok. Why? I don't know. I don't know why I do a lot of the things I do. But anyways, I get on the old TikTok and I have like, it's nothing for like 9 months. Like, I think I get up to like 1,300 followers, which on TikTok, if you know anything about TikTok, that is nothing. And, but I was having some fun, making some videos, popping off, doing my thing. I happen to like TikTok a lot more than like the static relationship that Facebook and Instagram. Now Instagram has Reels, and they're really trying to compete more with TikTok with that Reels program that they have. Looks like you can now reply to a reel with a reel, like one of the functions they have in TikTok, which I like because I feel like it builds a community. You're responding to people in with video format, so I like that a lot. And it's one of my favorite functions about TikTok. Well, anyways, so I had a video pop off on TikTok about, I don't know, in October, and it went super super viral. It's like close to 14 million views right now, and it was just a stupid one-off thing that I did. Kind of making light of somebody trying to, dog people that maybe look or act differently than like our normal societal norms. And so, anyways, which if you know me in real life, I don't like that shit. Leave people alone. Let them fucking do what they fucking do, right? So, anyways, I I had a video pop off, and I grew to like, I mean, like in a weekend, to a following of about, I don't know, some like maybe 80 some odd thousand followers, which is, it's pretty good, man. That's a pretty decent following on TikTok. You're gonna get views at that point. And then so, anyways, there's a point I'm going to this story. So they changed the algorithm on TikTok recently, and so like my views are way, 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 way down. They're fucking garbage. And and it's true for a lot of people. A lot of people are complaining about that. So whatever, I'm nobody. I don't deserve anything special, but I'm trying to get this live stream podcast thing going, and I thought that a good way to do that would be to promote it on TikTok where I have like some of my largest exposure. And so, like trying to be a good little capitalist, even though TikTok is owned by the evil Chinese, and we seem to think that they're not the most competent How the fuck are the Chinese not the best capitalists on the entire planet, and we think they're somehow communist? They're far and away better capitalists than we are. Anyways, that's a whole other thing. So I'd pay to promote my video, a video. The video I paid to promote was like a snippet of one of these lives, right? It was just a snippet of one of these lives like I'm doing right now. And so, I mean, it wasn't cheap, man. It was like $20 a day for 2 days. I just wanted to see if I get, what the fuck is she doing? I'm sorry, you're going to see her liquor box in her ass. She does it all the time. See, but you see what I just did right now? There's a moral of this story. So, I pay to promote it, and it goes under review. Now, it is by far one of the tamest things I've ever put on TikTok. By far, one of the tamest things I've ever put on TikTok. And it went under review for 20 minutes. Okay? 20 hours. 20 minutes. 20 hours. And they declined to promote my video because they said that I cuss. Do you know how much foul shit's on TikTok? You know how much crazy propaganda and ideas are on social media? But they won't promote my video because I think I said the F word and the S word, which, if you're not familiar with, is fucking shit. I said it in my video just offhandedly because I don't know how to talk without cursing. I'm not educated enough. So the moral of this story is I'm never going to go viral, I did go viral. I am never going to be any kind of massive influencer, especially on TikTok, because I'm Mr. Content Warning. I'm like on the verge of having my shit claimed or fucking struck down all the time. So we'll see how long it takes for me to get booted off of YouTube, but I don't think I'm 1/8 as bad as some of the shit that I see out there. So anyways, that's a little story. So that's something that happened to me this weekend. It was stupid as fuck. So anyways, let's watch these little weird ass videos. I'll talk over them and it'll be super uncomfortable.
July 29th, 2019, patrons file into a busy bar in downtown LA for the start of an always entertaining open mic night. You never know what types of performances you'll get on nights like these, or what kind of people will grace the stage with their presence. And on this particular evening, patrons would bear witness to one of the strangest acts they'd likely ever seen, and it was performed by a man named Robert Camus.
Fucking he got that ass.
Make my face.
Interestingly, Robert has a long history here across YouTube, being featured in what seems like countless videos performing skateboarding tricks with a group of friends.
Forgot who we're
but on
watching.
this night, Robert...
Maybe I should do that. This is Robert Camus, YouTube's darkest videos. Who the hell are we watching? I don't know. I don't know who we're watching. I'll figure it out and give him credit later.
Was ready to show off another skill of his as he took to the stage to perform a
Never trust
freestyle
someone that
rap.
looks like that.
What is this gangster rap right here? I'm a gangster in this house. Fucking cut the EMP off my fucking leg and then I'm out.
Starting out, the performance was, well, a little shaky to put it nicely, which was at least partially to blame on Robert's apparent drunken state. But a bad night of karaoke in isolation is nothing all that noteworthy. In fact, despite the lethal doses of cringe, many would actually view this as a great time, a funny memory, and even respect Robert for being so willing to go up there and just give it a try. However, his performance wasn't quite finished yet, and after fumbling his way through the beginning of the song, Robert's lyrics take an unexpected turn.
My fucking leg and then I'm out. Motherfucker, you don't even know I'm motherfucking news. I killed my bitch and buried that bitch in the fucking dirt.
Look at that dude's face.
Look at me and I'm fucking
Everybody's like, what the
The
fuck?
messy video shows Robert as he raps the line, "I killed my bitch and buried that bitch in the fucking dirt," before muttering that he has to leave because the cops are looking for him. It was a bizarre moment to say the least, and despite many in the crowd
say
trying
the
to
least.
play off the line as a joke, with the MC even saying that it was an Eminem-inspired performance,
Oh, yeah.
others in the audience were more visibly
Look at that guy.
concerned.
Man,
As
he
it
wants to
turns
get out
out,
of there, and I don't blame him.
They had every right to be.
Well, we're inside this bar, the King Eddie bar, and this is where
What
Camus
up,
was standing
Dave
when he did
Lopez?
this rap version. And I guess the big question is, was
Los
it a
Angeles.
confession?
Parked out front of the establishment was Robert's gray Prius, and in the trunk of this Prius was a
ecologically
shovel, along with fresh dirt and
Oh.
fresh blood. Blood
Robert.
that belonged to his girlfriend, Amanda Custer. And coincidentally, that very day,
Where's the dog?
Amanda Custer had been reported as missing after a neighbor had witnessed
Won't be
Robert
seeing her
carrying
no
her
more.
limp body and placing it in the trunk of his car before driving off, only to emerge hours later, alone at this open mic night. In the moment, a bizarre performance was all this seemed to be, but today, many refer to this rap as being an actual confession, and in
Right.
the end, this footage would ultimately be used in court and lead to Robert's conviction for the murder of Amanda Custer, even though to this very day, her body has never been found. But if the words of Robert are to be believed, then it's sadly very likely that she's out there somewhere, buried deep in the dirt.
Now, if you've seen Amanda Custer,
You know, what the fuck, Robert? What the fuck was that? We'll go back to him. I meant to tell you guys, look, we're going to watch all these stories today. And I don't know. I'm blind reacting to all of it. Some of it might be shit. Some of it might be fun. I don't fucking know. But if there's anything that you find interesting and that you want to know more about, like you want me to do a deep dive dig into, here's what the plan is. I'm going to dive into it. I'm going to get the Pixie to help me because she could be a fucking internet sleuth. Let me tell you that right now. We're going to do a dive into it, learn everything we can about the situation, and then I'll come back and report it to you. That's whichever one of these stories today gets the most interest. If I don't get any interest, that's okay. We'll move on. But we're going to do that until we find one of these where people are like, hey, you know what? I want to know what the hell's going on a little bit. Give me the background on that, Hammy.
police want to hear
It has
from
been
you.
3 days since Amanda Custer's been seen.
I like this because it's like we're watching these shows
So
together.
remember, people have to learn how to swim. It's great fun though, and something you can do with
Hello.
all of your friends.
I gotta be
During the
careful
summer of
with my accents.
2022 in Karei Yosef, Israel, a popular corporate villa had been rented out by a local marketing agency to host a company event. The location was highly sought after due to its
Yeah, I wanna
large
go swim
outdoor
in
pool
there.
area, making it the perfect spot for employees to unwind and connect
like
outside
that's
of their
Stockbridge.
typical working environment. And on this day, the 21st of July, 50 employees of this company would gather at the party to enjoy the hot summer sun and the cool water of the pool.
Yeah.
And by all accounts, the party had been going off without a hitch. Until it happened. As unsuspecting partygoers were hanging in and around the pool, some began to notice that the water level appeared to be receding, with one keen witness pulling out their phone to record the unfolding ordeal. And just as they hit that record button, things would fall into complete chaos.
What the fuck? What the fuck just happened? Is that a sinkhole? The fucking sinkhole. In the pool.
Suddenly, a large sinkhole opens up beneath the pool, in turn creating a massive vortex and an impossibly strong current, dragging essentially everything in its path down towards the opening. And within mere seconds, the pool, once completely filled with water, had become completely barren, with even the pool floats disappearing beneath the surface of the earth. Luckily, at the time there were only about 6 partygoers in the pool, and 3 of them had immediately made their way to safety, but one man could be seen standing dangerously close to the newly formed crater, even slipping and falling to the ground
Whoa,
just
dude,
inches
you're gonna
away
die.
from being pulled into its opening. Thankfully, he too had managed to make his way to safety, but the 2 others weren't so lucky,
Some
as
guys
in the
are.
moments immediately before this video began, they had been sucked into the depths of the
No
sinkhole.
shit.
Of the 2, one would be able to quickly pull his way to safety, while the other was nowhere to be found.
Fucking
As
sinkholes
rescuers
are
made their way to the
crazy.
scene and attempted to enter the hole, it was discovered that it was far deeper than anyone could have imagined, with later reports
I need to get with someone and do like, because I could do interview for him if I want with this. I need, if anybody out there knows anyone, I need some kind of fucking geologist scientist that knows about sinkholes, because I find that shit fascinating and I want to know more about it. So if anybody out there knows someone or wants to be interviewed, or even if you got some crazy ass conspiracy theories, I wouldn't mind having a few people on there. Get out your boy Uncle Hammy. I want to know more about it.
showing that the pit was a staggering 43 feet deep,
Holy
with
shit.
the entire opening being filled with water. And the missing swimmer, 32-year-old Khalil Kimhi, was trapped at the very bottom. It would take 4 grueling hours of navigating that claustrophobic grave to finally reach Khalil, who by that point was sadly long gone, having likely already perished by the time rescuers even reached the scene, passing away in what must have been one of the most horrifying ways imaginable. After all was said and done, it was revealed that the owner of the villa had built the pool in an unsafe location, and had done so without a permit, leading to charges of negligent manslaughter.
My mouse
And though
is
this
bugging
event was no
everybody.
doubt a
Trying to get
tragedy,
it over to my
it's
other
easy to
screen.
see just how much worse this could have been
Don't
if
mind
more
me,
people
I'm
had been
just
in that
fucking
pool at the
irritated.
time. And what truly haunts me the most about this clip is just how unexpected it was. One minute you're enjoying a beautiful swimming pool, and the next, you're trapped 40 feet beneath the earth, drowning with no chance of survival. All because of a freak phenomenon that is entirely unpredictable.
Could you imagine you're like thinking you're the cool, rich ass person having fun swimming on a hot summer day at some pool party, having some drinks, smoking a little mota, and then you just get sucked down into a 40-foot chasm out of nowhere from the center of the pool, in a pool that's like waist deep anyway, so you think you're totally going to be safe. How the hell can you drown in waist deep water? I know people do, but the reality is, how the hell can you drown in water that deep, right? And then you do. And then you do. And then you're dead. Jesus Louises.
Snow is mechanically pressed 1,800 pounds to the square inch and emerges in 50-pound blocks of dry ice. When placed in liquids, it returns to its original gaseous state. Desert ice is really hot stuff.
From one pool party to another, this next clip takes us to Moscow, Russia in February of 2020, where an influencer named Ekaterina Didenko was preparing to celebrate her 29th birthday.
Okay.
Just a few years prior, Ekaterina had graduated from medical school, earning her the title of pharmacist.
Okay.
But rather than going the traditional
Good for you,
route
good for
and
you,
pursuing a
Katerina.
career in pharmacy, she instead chose to use her expertise to start a blog focused on
sure.
creating
Why?
homemade
Why not?
medicines in order to save her viewers trips to the pharmacy.
Okay.
This type of content is nothing new, and in most cases it's highly
got a pretty
controversial,
face,
and
has
Ekaterina was no
knowledge.
exception to
Why
this, with many calling her practices and advice potentially dangerous. This, however, did not stop her from amassing a following of over 1 million people, which was spread out across her Instagram page along with other platforms.
Alright.
And despite her content being controversial in nature, she quickly carved out a legitimate career as an influencer by 2020.
Okay.
And with her birthday approaching on the 28th of February, she wanted to throw the perfect party
Leap
to
year,
show off
baby.
to all of
Oh,
her
no,
followers.
one more day. 29 would be leap year.
Helping plan the night was Ekaterina's husband, Valentin Didenko, who was on board to make the evening as grand as possible.
Right on, Valentin.
And Valentin had the perfect
Looks like a
plan,
nice guy.
something he called a steam show. Previously, the couple had booked a venue to accommodate all their guests, with one of the most appealing amenities being its swimming pool, and
Right.
using his
Nice.
limited
Again,
knowledge
we
of
got a
science,
swimming
along with
pool thing
inspiration
too,
from a
guys.
somewhat viral trend at the time, Valentin thought of a way to turn that ordinary pool room into something extraordinary
Oh,
by
fuck.
using dry ice to fill the entire room with steam, as dry ice combined with water creates
I
an
think I know
immediate
where this
dense
is going.
fog, in turn creating his steam show. And so, as the party was going on and guests were having a great time,
Looks good, looks
Valentine decided
fun,
to reveal
everyone's
the main
enjoying
event
themselves.
and brought all the partygoers into the room, giving them gowns and goggles to wear before dumping a box full of dry ice into the water.
No, you didn't. Doesn't that take all the fucking air out of the room?
Материал. Только что обновленный. Газообразное состояние.
Doesn't that take all the air out of the room, bro? Did you fucking guys suffocate? That's a lot of dry ice, and that room does not look very big. Holy shit.
Instantly, the pool disappears within a cloud of gas, creating
Yeah.
the incredible show that both Ekaterina and Valentine had dreamed of, with Ekaterina herself pulling out her phone to record the moment.
Yeah.
And quickly, it became apparent that the pool wasn't just for show, as Valentine himself suddenly dives into the mist,
Oh, you
disappearing
fucking
within its hidden
did it.
water.
When you freeze? Doesn't it get like freezing?
But there was just one problem.
More than one.
The chemical reaction that happens when dry ice and water connects doesn't just cause the formation of mist. It causes the formation of carbon dioxide that is produced in such a
All the air
highly
goes out the
concentrated form that it appears as fog, meaning that the cloud we are seeing here is made entirely of straight CO2, which in such high concentration
The room
is
is
toxic
small,
to
man.
humans, with it causing shortness of breath and eventual asphyxiation. And
aren't
though
they all gonna
Ekaterina's
fucking suffocate in the
recording
room?
shows the group having
Do
the
they all
time of
die?
their lives, no one realized that when that dry ice was placed in the pool, it had in turn placed all of their lives in danger.
Yeah.
Making matters worse, Valentine wanted the show to be as long-lasting as possible, and in turn ordered the doors to be closed in order to keep that fog inside the small room, meaning that there was very little ventilation to filter out this toxic
Isn't
gas,
she a fucking
making
doctor?
the levels of CO2 not just very dangerous,
What did she
but
know?
incredibly deadly. And Valentine had just dove directly into its heart.
What did she know? Why would she not know?
He would break the surface just
can't
one
do that.
time after this, and although the crowd cheers him on,
I'm stupid
believing
as
he's
fuck
just
at it.
splashing around and having some fun, at this moment, his lungs were filling with fluid,
Right.
and he was suffocating to death, as below the water he was drowning, and on its surface he was suffocating.
Oh my
He was
God.
trapped, with the only outcome being death.
This fucking dude jumped into a pool that he filled with dry ice. He had to be drunk as fuck, right? Right? I mean, I've done stupid shit drunk. I've done shit probably that stupid too. But he jumped into a pool filled with dry ice. And first, wouldn't you freeze? Wouldn't it be freezing?
Ekaterina then turns the camera on herself,
She's a
revealing
doctor.
another
She-
man
she
entering the
knows
water,
better.
as she's laughing and yelling in amusement. And behind her, all of her friends are seen recording the ordeal, oblivious to the fact that Valentine was now dying at the bottom of the pool.
Yeah.
They were far
Hope
too
you see it in the
distracted
war.
trying to get the perfect shot for their own social media
Oh
pages.
my God.
In the end, it truly was the spectacle that Valentine and Ekaterina had dreamed of. Shortly after the recording had ended, partygoers would finally realize that something was terribly wrong, as some began to experience shortness of breath that eventually caused them to pass out. Meanwhile, others began to feel sharp pains throughout their body that were eventually learned to be the result of chemical burns. Once the room was finally evacuated, 3 partygoers would be unaccounted for, as Natalia Manakova, Yuri Elfarov, and Valentine were left in the foggy room, dead at the bottom of the pool. What should have been the perfect day for Ekaterina had instead
Happy
ended with her
birthday, you're
becoming
dead.
a widow. And as off-putting as this video is, many would point to Ekaterina's behavior following the incident as even more
different dude.
unusual. Immediately after the incident occurred, Ekaterina would start her grieving process by posting this video for the
Of
world
course
to
she
see,
did.
and
She's a
subsequently
piece of
vlogging
shit.
her
She
experience at the
fucking knew.
hospital
She
and
fucking
documenting
knew.
the death of her husband.
She fucking knew. She fucking knew. She fucking knew.
It was admittedly a bit bizarre, as many accused her of exploiting the death of her husband to gain internet followers, with further questions being posed as to why she hadn't considered the deadly effects of dry ice and water, as after all, she was an expert in the field of science.
That's what I'm saying.
The scrutiny towards Ekaterina became so intense at one point that Russian authorities launched an investigation into her actions, claiming that it may be possible to charge her for causing death by negligence, though to my knowledge, nothing ever came of this. Just 5 whole months after the incident, Ekaterina would remarry, with those initial
5
posts documenting the death of her first husband, leading to her gaining an additional 500,000 followers.
She planned that shit.
Deep inside this vertical
She planned
city,
that
a
shit. I
machine
want to know more
has
about
come to life.
Katerina.
A
That's my
machine
vote.
with a terrible secret.
Take the stairs. For God's sake, take the
Oh man. I'm glad this stuff's international.
It was a quiet January night in the Yuan Lin Finance and Economics building, located in western Taiwan. The 16th-floor tower held its fair share of both office spaces and residences,
I'd like to go to
though as the clock reached past midnight, only the building manager would be awake in its lobby.
Right.
As he settled in for another uneventful night, the silence was suddenly broken by a woman rushing in with a small child. The man didn't recognize her as a resident, and given that the offices were closed for the night, he stopped her and questioned why she was there. The woman, however, brushed him off in a hurry, stating that they were only there to meet a friend, before entering the elevator and disappearing out of view. According to the man, he felt a bad omen in the air after the encounter, and only grew more concerned as the morning arrived and the woman had yet to come down and exit the building. So out of curiosity, the manager turned to the building's CCTV footage to determine where the two had gone, only to see this.
Was I'm gonna get him? Oh, what happened to that baby? They take their jackets off. And their shoes. What?
Inside the elevator, the woman begins hitting the button to floor 11 in what seems to be a panic, and as the doors close behind her and her child, she then removes her coat and places it on the ground, before doing the same with her kid. When the elevator then reaches their desired floor, she quietly slips off her shoes and exits in a hurry.
What?
It's unusual footage, as their behavior just seems slightly off, and it's made all the more disturbing due to what they could or couldn't see on the cameras after that. Upon exiting the elevator, the pair are seen walking down the hallway on floor 11 in this grainy footage recaptured by the man's cell phone, with the two heading in the general direction of the stairwell, which also happened to be the sole entrance to the roof. And from there, the two aren't seen again. Noting this, the manager immediately began fearing the worst, as their bizarre behavior coupled with the route seemingly leading to the roof could only mean one.
This reminds me of that story that happened at that haunted hotel in Los Angeles where I saw that Netflix documentary. We need to review that one again. I wonder if I can find that on YouTube. I can't stream shit from Netflix. Where that girl ended up being missing and they couldn't find her, and then I think later she was in the fucking water tank. What was the name of that? That was crazy.
Thing. And quickly, the police were called for what they believed to be a cleanup job, figuring that the two had jumped off the roof. This belief was further fueled by the woman's actions in the elevator, as removing one shoe prior to is apparently a somewhat common thing in Asian countries, as they don't want to track dirt into the afterlife. However, once officers arrived on scene and searched the entire perimeter of the building, there was no sign of the mother and daughter, not even a single trace of blood, meaning they couldn't possibly have jumped. Police would then look through the entirety of the footage and review the positioning of the cameras, only to determine that virtually all exits were covered by the watchful eyes of their CCTV.
Okay,
If these two had left the building, they would surely have the footage to prove it. Though while sifting through the entire night, this moment was the last they'd ever be seen on camera. So if they hadn't jumped and if they hadn't left, then they must be somewhere in the building, they thought, which led to a full-scale search of the complex, with officers going door to door searching every nook and cranny. However, while asking around, not a single resident had seen the pair that night, or even heard them for that matter. And when their initial sweep was concluded, the police would be left empty-handed, only uncovering just a few set of clues. For starters, they would find the clothes and shoes left behind on the elevator, and they would also find the woman's moped, which she had driven to the building. And finally, they would find a single suitcase, found vacant on the top steps leading to the roof.
She did this.
Police would go on to describe this piece of luggage as suspicious, but never revealed its true contents. In fact, following an initial report, they would never give confirmation as to whether it was involved in this case or not. Either way, it led them to a dead end, as they believed these two could not have possibly left that building, though at the same time, they clearly weren't there.
She paid someone to help her
Multiple times after this, the building would be searched and searched and searched again, even as recently as 2013, when they would go as far as to check the water pipes and even the water tank itself, which was inspired by an unfolding case of a similar nature halfway across the world. But no trace of the pair was ever discovered.
Ooh, is that the one I was talking
Immediately after this footage was taken, these two vanished into thin air.
She paid someone.
Following the disappearance,
There's my theory. She paid someone to help her disappear. She was running from probably a dude, right? Let's face it. So she probably paid someone to help her disappear, and they did this whole plan because culturally, this probably, and it sounds pretty, it's a crazy story, but it probably leads people down some nutty paths on what actually happened to her. She's somewhere.
News would broadcast the footage where a man named Zhang would come forward stating that this was his wife and 4-year-old daughter. The woman's surname was Leo, and the pair had 4 children together, though their relationship was anything but perfect. Multiple reports claim that on that very night, the two had gotten into an argument, with some going as far as to say that Zhang had actually abused her, causing her to leave the home in a hurry, grabbing only their youngest daughter. Meanwhile, their eldest daughter would go on record stating that Leo had told her that they were going to visit a friend's house just for a few days, only to never return. Despite the significance of discovering the identity of this woman and her daughter, it would ultimately fail to help solve the case, as there have been no sightings of these two since this moment, turning this into one of Taiwan's most mysterious cases of all time. And in the region, 3 major theories have emerged. First, many locals in the area believe that something otherworldly happened to these two, with one resident at the time stating, "I think they entered another time and space." This belief is actually so strong that even as of just a few years ago, that 11th floor is practically left vacant, as the only remaining family on that floor claims that everyone moved out of fear of the supernatural surrounding the incident.
Okay.
Another long-lasting theory was that the two were still somewhere in the building, having potentially taken their lives or just gotten stuck there.
Come on.
And officials believed this for years after the case, assuming that eventually someone would happen upon them. Though that day has never come, and due to the extreme summer heat in the region, it's likely that the smell alone would have led to their discovery
you got 2
by
bodies
now.
freaking
Which brings us to our third
that.
theory, that somehow the two had actually managed to leave the building without detection.
Yeah.
Due to the camera positioning in the hotel, this seems rather unlikely, but some claim that there is a specific route that potentially could have provided just enough cover for them to avoid all the cameras. But this would have had to have been precise and seemingly deliberate. What makes this so strange, though, is that Leo apparently had limited to no knowledge of this building beforehand, begging the question how she could navigate in such an efficient manner, or why she would want to for that matter. And this is far from the only questions regarding this. Like, why would she even enter this building to begin with if she was just going to leave? And why go to that 11th floor in particular and remove those articles of clothing?
Because it looked...
And maybe most importantly of all, if she had somehow snuck around those cameras, how had she or her child never been seen again? Nothing about this case makes any sense, and honestly, what happened to these two at this point is anyone's guess. as this is practically all the
She's living
information
in
available
Canada,
on
dude.
their disappearance. Since
Her
then, there have
daughter.
been no sightings, no use of their health
They got a new
insurance, no use of their bank accounts, and their daughter's records show that she has never been enrolled to another school. It's almost as if they evaporated into
Because
that
they're living
cold,
in Canada.
damp air. Part of me hopes that this was all an attempt to flee an abusive relationship,
It was.
and that somehow this was all just a distraction for these two to escape and start a new life elsewhere, which
There's
could
another
explain
one
that
I'd like to know
supposed
more
friend they were going to meet,
I kinda
why they
wanna
shed
know
their
about the
coats,
Russian
and how
lady
they
more. I
managed
wanna know what
to
happened
sneak
to
out
her
of there in the
after.
first place. But things of that nature are
This is
easier said than
interesting.
done, and I can't help but get a sinking feeling that they are no longer with us, as surely at some point, some trace of them would have appeared by now. But unfortunately, an absolute conclusion is something that perhaps we may never get, and instead, we're simply left with this chilling video, which is undoubtedly one of YouTube's darkest.
All right, get some. Party
The
style.
celebration was well underway. December 5th,
This feels
2009
like
marked
Russia
the
again.
8-year anniversary of the beloved Lame
Oh.
Horse, a roughly 5,000 square foot nightclub located in Perm,
Shit
Russia.
going down in Russia,
On the
man.
evening of the 4th, the club began to fill with partygoers keen on joining in on the massive party. To commemorate the night, a cameraman and an interviewer would be on
Alright.
scene to document the events of that evening, which they did by first speaking to patrons as they roamed the club, getting their thoughts and opinions on the
motherfucker.
celebration.
He loves to get drunk and fist fight. Right. See how he grabs him?
The night all seemed to be in good
Loves
fun,
fighting.
and it was only just beginning for most, with the party set to go all throughout the night. And as the recording continues, it's clear that the club had big plans to bring in this new
What?
year.
Throw him up.
Following the interviews, the footage shows us a view of the dance floor, which was
I mean,
occupied
this
by a
looks
group
fun.
of performers who had been hired to energize the crowd and further build the hype of the night.
boom, boom,
The organizers had even hired an MC for the evening, whose job was to
Oh,
keep
this
the party
fucking dude.
alive.
I want to get that coat. I should get that coat for these streams. That shit would look tight on me. It's probably the right size too. Nah, I might need a bigger one.
By this point, over 300 people had made their way into the building, as the MC continues the show by joking around with two young women, who were clearly guests of the bar, with the cameraman fixing his lens on the three as the crowd watches on in amusement.
Yeah, what's gonna happen? Right now, something's
But
gonna
it's
happen.
at this exact moment that the camera unintentionally catches something far more interesting. Something that could easily be missed, as it seemed so unimportant in the moment.
What's going on with that chick?
While everyone's eyes are fixed forward at the show before them,
What?
this woman, standing on the far right of the camera, barely occupying a sliver of the
She's not
frame,
looking at the
casually turns her head, only for her eyes to lock onto something behind her. And noticing the woman's bizarre reaction, the cameraman follows her lead and turns the camera in the same
It's gonna be a
direction,
ghost?
revealing this.
That dude's probably like 5'5". Uh-oh.
Unbeknownst to pretty
That's on
much
fire.
everyone in the club at that
Did they all
time,
burn up?
a spark from the show's pyrotechnics had made contact with the club's ceiling, which was covered in decorative twigs for the party, and within a split second, a fire would erupt. The initial shock caused many to freeze in place for
Yeah.
precious seconds, unable to comprehend what exactly was happening. And it wasn't until the MC, the same one in charge of keeping that party alive, began to shout, "Ladies and gentlemen, guests of the club, we are on fire, please leave the hall," that the patrons would finally
We're on fire.
unfreeze.
Everyone go home. Sorry, you gotta go home. We're on fire now. We're still filming.
Following this announcement, the crowd flew into a panic, desperately making their way to the exit, which is where the first fatal issue arose.
Dude's smoking a
The club
cigarette.
supposedly had two exits, one through the front door and the other located behind the stage. However, that second exit had no signs indicating where it was,
Right.
meaning that practically no one in the room knew that it was even there.
Sure, everything
Because
was
of
up to
this,
code.
most of the patrons began pushing towards that one main exit. Upon making his way into the hallway, the cameraman reveals the exit and, in turn, another devastating issue. In order to control the crowd going into the venue earlier that night, one of the 2 doors at the front entrance was locked, meaning that this small opening was the only means of escape for the 300 plus people trapped inside. And to make matters worse, by this point, the entire venue was now shrouded in smoke.
Holy shit. That looks fun. This is why I don't
As
go to
so many
clubs,
people
guys.
were attempting to fit through that small exit, they became stuck, causing a logjam and in turn, a human crush. And the more people desperately tried to push through that door, the more jammed it became.
How many people
Meanwhile, those still trapped on the dance floor were left hopelessly lost in that impenetrable smoke. And within the mob of people rushing towards that exit, the camera suddenly goes dark before shutting off completely.
45 people lost their lives. 45. Over under is 45.
Somehow, the cameraman, along with multiple others, were able to squeeze their way out of the exit, as evident when the camera begins to record sometime later, this time in the middle of the road, revealing hints of the havoc that was occurring both inside and outside of the club. But tragically, this is where one last fatal factor was added to the equation, which was highlighted by a quote from a survivor and one of the very first people to escape the club. After I got out, there were no firemen or emergency services for about 20 minutes. Nobody at all. There were only 2 ambulances altogether. They managed to take 6 or 7 men and left. No more ambulance cars arrived, at least I saw none. Firemen had pulled out a number of people by then. Half clothed, they were simply laid out on the cold asphalt. Nobody cared for them. People were lying on the ground for about an hour and a half, definitely for no less than an hour. It could be that many of them died because of this, because of the cold. It was 16 degrees below zero outdoors.
Holy shit.
In what has since been heavily criticized, and rightfully so, the emergency response team only fueled the intensity of this disaster, as many of those trapped inside were left to their own devices.
Where the hell
those
were
who
the
were
authorities?
rescued were laid out on the street with severe injuries, and most of their clothes burned off, forced to lie there unable to move for over an hour in the freezing cold. It's unknown how many deaths were caused by this alone,
45.
but if these first-hand accounts are to be believed, it's likely that many were. Not only had the venue itself failed these victims, but the emergency response team had as well. Ultimately, 101 people would die on the scene that day, and an additional 55 perished later in the hospital, with the catastrophe amassing a death toll of 156 total people, making it the deadliest fire in Russia since the fall of the Soviet Union. The footage from that night, taken before, during, and after the event, truly account for some of the most disturbing on this site.
Hey, let's go to the
but
club.
2 moments in particular have always stuck in my mind. The first being that initial stunned reaction from a lady just off screen, as she had noticed what was transpiring before anyone else. And the other being that first reveal of the small fire on the ceiling that would so quickly and so savagely engulf the entire building and claim the lives of so many. I wanted to briefly mention that I have brand new Patreon tiers, and now for just $3 a month, you can view my content early, along with some...
All right, so those were some pretty interesting stories. You know what I need to do, though? I don't remember who the fuck... I just lost something over here. I need that, I need that, I need that. La, 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 la. Sorry, guys, a little bit of technical difficulties with my... Where's my scenes? How did I lose my scenes? I want to go over here. You bear with me, guys. I am doing my technical stuff. This is the podcast we're watching on YouTube is Nick Crowley. I think that was pretty interesting. Those 3 were pretty interesting to me. I want to know more about the Russian lady. By the way, see that package? It's been there for weeks, maybe months. It's got a rubber gasket in it for the dishwasher. We're going to go. I want to see sound fake that are real. I want to watch this crazy neighbor's secret thing from Mr. Ballin. Stop, Mr. Ballin. I'm not ready for you yet. Now, I lost something. Bear with me, guys. I got too much running off my Mac. I need a better computer setup. This belongs. So you bear with me. I got to turn a monitor off when I'm streaming. So this is there. There's my cameras. Where's my overlays? Hang with me. I'm missing my overlays. My scenes. I guess I could just jump from scene to scene. Here. Yeah, I'm in me. Okay. We will bear with it. I'm going to go to, sorry guys, I don't know what I did. All right, so now we're going to watch this story from Mr. Ballin. I've been enjoying his content lately. I just kind of came to him. There's some, I don't, you probably guys know a lot about these people that I'm showing you because they've been, YouTube stars and internet stars for a long time. I don't. This is kind of new to me. So anyways, this is the craziest neighbor's secret caught on camera. And so let's switch over to this one. See if I can do this right without my little easy clicker. I did it. That's good. All right, let's watch this story. I'm interested in this one.
Today's story is about a typical middle-class American family that had everything going for them. Mom and dad were still totally in love 25 years after getting married. Their 2 kids were happy, successful, and poised to do huge things in life. But then, in 2021, it was like things just started to go so badly for this family. It was like they had hit the stretch of unfathomably bad luck. But their misfortunes had nothing to do with bad luck. Their misfortunes were the result of someone in their midst carrying around a very big secret. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, the next time the like button is in a deep sleep, put a wig on them, also a beard and mustache combo, and then disguise their room to look like a hospital suite, and then violently shake them awake and tell them they've just woken up after being in a medically induced coma for years. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story.
Mr. Ballin. Mr. Ballin. Oh, better turn off the screen.
In the early 1990s, a woman in her early 20s named Krista Frater was working as a manager inside of a retail store called the Boston Store in Madison, Wisconsin. Not long after she was hired there, the Boston Store would hire another employee to work at their Madison location. His name was Bart Halderson, and like Krista, he was in his early 20s, although he was 3 years younger than Krista, and he was hired to be a clerk. Bart and Krista didn't know each other before working at the same location, but their shifts often overlapped, and so in time they got to know each other, and they found they had a lot in common. They both had grown up roughly outside of Madison, Wisconsin. They both had graduated from the same college, the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and they both shared a love of home design. Krista, who had majored in art history in college, was very passionate about interior home design. As for Bart, he was just one of those people who naturally could fix just about anything with his bare hands, and growing up, his favorite projects were anything to do with home repairs. Whether it was something super simple or super complex, he didn't care. He just found it incredibly satisfying to keep a home in immaculate condition. And so Bart and Krista bonded over their commonalities.
Handyman Bart.
And in time, their working friendship evolved into a full-fledged romance. And by 1994, they had left the Boston Store, they had gotten married, and they had moved in together to their own apartment in DeForest, Wisconsin, which is not far from Madison. 2 years after that, in 1996, Bart and Krista welcomed their first child into the world. It was a little boy who they named Mitchell. And as
What
soon
up,
as Mitchell
Mitchell?
was born, Krista decided she wanted to stay home with the baby, and Bart was in full support, and so he went out and he got a great job as an accountant, which paid enough money to pay for the whole family. And
Good job,
18
Bart.
months after Mitchell was born, Bart and Krista welcomed their second and final child, another boy who they named Chandler. A few years after Chandler was
Bing.
born, Bart and Krista had saved up just enough money that they could finally afford to buy a house of their own. And the house they finally settled on was just this very modest, small, two-story home in this very quiet little town in Wisconsin called Windsor. Windsor is not far from DeForest, where they had been renting an apartment. But this little house in Windsor was perfect for Bart, Krista, and their boys. Not only did it have enough space for the family, but because it was their own house, as soon as they moved in,
Let's fix
Krista
it
got
up.
to really lean in to her passion for interior design, and she got to design the entire layout of the house. And then she continued to take pride in keeping the house perfectly tidy and beautiful at all times. As for Bart, he immediately began doing home repair project after
Fucking
home
A,
repair
Bart.
project. This house became his trophy, and he wanted to make sure his trophy was polished at all times. And it wasn't just the physical house that made this feel like their forever home. It was also their neighbors. As soon as they moved in, Bart and Krista made friends with all of the people that lived on their street, and they were all so friendly and welcoming. And then before long, the Haldersons were deeply invested in community activities like the Boy Scouts and the Kiwanis Club, and they were donating their time and money to other charities. I mean, so quickly, the Halderson family just found where they belonged. And
That's
over the
it.
next
Good for
2+
you guys.
decades, life for the Haldersons in this little home in Windsor remained perfect. Bart continued to move up the ladder at his accounting firm, and Krista continued to be a
Fascinated with the
devoted
zoom
mother
in,
and
guys.
housekeeper. As for the kids,
Check out
Mitchell
Mitchell
and
Ball.
Chandler, they were given every opportunity their parents could possibly give them. And in that loving and supportive environment, they both thrived. By
All right. Good for you
2021,
guys.
the older brother, Mitchell, who was 25 at the time, he had moved out and was living alone in an apartment,
Wait.
and he had graduated from college.
both
He had
Mitchell? No,
landed
Bart
an incredible
Mitchell.
IT job with a local, very successful
their
company.
kid after his
He was
brother.
engaged to be married, and he was about to buy his own house. As for the younger brother, Chandler, who was 23 at the time, he was still living at home with Bart and Krista.
Or these are their
but he
kids,
was
a
doing
bunch of
just
time
as
went
well
by.
as his
I'm
older
not fucking
brother.
paying
He was in
attention.
his final year of college, but he had already accepted a full-time job with SpaceX that
Whoa.
was set to start in Florida as soon as he graduated. And while
Get
he
on
was
that
in
Musk
his final
money.
year of college, in between his studies, he worked part-time at a local insurance company to help pay rent to his parents, and he also volunteered the rest of his spare time with the Madison Police Department on their rescue scuba diving team. Chandler was also in a committed relationship with his girlfriend. But despite how well everything was going for Bart,
Wonderful
for Krista,
life,
for
guys.
Mitchell, for Chandler, their lives were about to take a serious turn for the worst. It all started in June of 2021. That month, Chandler, who was only weeks away from flying out to Titusville, Florida to start his job with SpaceX, fell down an entire flight of stairs, smashing his head in the process. Now, he immediately picked himself up and tried to tell himself that he was okay, but over the course of that day, he started to feel
Not so
woozy
okay.
and disoriented, and his legs started to feel numb. And so in a panic, he rushed himself to the hospital, and unfortunately, when they scanned his brain and they checked him out, the doctors discovered he had a severe concussion from this
You
fall,
think?
and he had a brain bleed that almost certainly would require surgery at some point down the road. Also, the numbness in his legs appeared to be the result of permanent nerve damage. And so
Fun.
suddenly, Chandler, who was so excited about this opportunity in Florida, is now back home in a neck brace with a cane to get around. And even with the cane, he can barely walk.
How'd he
And then
fall down the
adding
fucking
insult
stairs?
to injury, he almost immediately lost the job at SpaceX
'Cause
because
they're
he couldn't
good, they're
travel
nice.
to Florida to start the job. And so they filled it with someone else. Chandler did his best to stay
Elon will
positive
do
and
it.
optimistic, but I mean, this was a crushing blow. Everything he had worked for had just been taken away. And it was
Isn't it weird how
crushing for
life's
his
like
family too. I mean, seeing their beloved Chaz, as they called him, laying on the couch
Greatest
looking totally
nickname
miserable and
ever.
depressed all
It's usually
day
for
was
Charles,
awful.
so
But despite how
that
bad
Chandler.
Chandler's accident was, the trauma it inflicted on Chandler and his family was nothing compared to what happened next. The Haldersons owned a small cabin that was located in a part of Wisconsin called White Lake. It was located about 3 hours drive to the north of their home in Windsor.
Doing good, you guys
and the
doing
cabin
good.
was situated inside of this rural forested area right near a big lake called White Lake, hence the name of the area.
Right.
This cabin had been in the Halderson family since the 1940s, and when Mitchell and Chandler were little kids, Bart and Krista would take them up there all the time to go fishing, to go swimming, or just to relax. It was
Sounds
like their
like the
vacation home.
idyllic
But at some point, Chandler and Mitchell
Midwestern
reached
life.
a certain age where they weren't that interested in going to the cabin anymore, and so as a result, Bart and Krista basically stopped going. However, just 2 weeks after Chandler's horrific injury, there was this huge storm that rolled through the White Lake area, and after the storm had passed, some people who lived permanently in White Lake called Bart and Krista and told them, hey, I was driving past your cabin and I saw there was some broken windows. It looks like your cabin might have been damaged from this storm. And so Bart and Krista, they're thinking, oh my goodness, we got to get up there as soon as we can and patch up that window and fix the rest of the cabin before another storm rolls through and totally ruins the cabin. And so Bart and Krista pull out their calendar and they see the next weekend coming up is the 4th of July weekend. The 4th of July is a very big holiday in America.
You had to fucking 4th of July is a week away. Mr. Ballin, I think you're dumbing it down for us, buddy. Like you know the 4th of July is the next fucking weekend. If you're that late into June. Like you know that. You don't I doubt you have to look at your fucking calendar to know that next weekend's the 4th of July. But all right, I'm being a picky bitch.
In 1988, a waitress who was living in Central Florida had just begun her shift at a local diner when she's standing in the middle of the restaurant and her heart just starts racing like mad. Now, she had not been running around or doing any heavy lifting, so it didn't make any sense. And so kind of startled by what was happening, she just turned around and went straight into the bathroom and sat down in a stall, waiting for this sensation to pass. But as she sat there, her heart just continued to beat like mad, and then she began to feel tingling in her feet and in her arms.
How did I do that, guys? Groups of hey, bear with me. I want the one we were in. Which one? Oh, let's go back.
Today's story is about a typical middle-class American family.
No, we were here?
And so again, Chandler's sitting there thinking, okay, this whole thing is a little bit weird.
Nope.
Works out over White Lake. And so Bart and Krista, they figure, you know what, let's just hold off and head up to our cabin in a couple of days to time it with the 4th of July weekend, and we can make the necessary repairs and we can enjoy the festivities of the holiday and kind of have a mini vacation up there. And so that was all fine and good. But right before they left for this trip up to White Lake, Bart and Krista started acting a little weird. On the evening of Thursday, July 1st, the day before Bart and Krista are supposed to leave for this trip, they begin packing up their things. And since Chandler lives with them, he's at home, he sees them doing this, and at some point he kind of got up and hobbled over and tried to help them pack, but that was short-lived because his legs were so weak. And so he sat down and just kind of watched them pack.
And
what he saw is they were packing lots and lots of cash and silver bars into their luggage. Although this was kind of odd to Chandler, he decided not to say anything because he figured, you know what, maybe they want to stash their cash and silver in the cabin like a keepsake. I don't know, but it's their business.
Okay, they got 2 houses. They've raised 2 kids. I think they said they both went to college. I mean, they met working he became an accountant. He was an accountant, right? He was laundering money. I'll bet you he was fucking laundering money.
Not mine. And so Bart and Krista, they continue to pack up their things, and Chandler, because he can't go anywhere, just continues to kind of watch them pack. And at some point, Chandler asks his parents, so how are you getting up to White Lake? And his parents would say, oh, we're just getting a ride from our friends, another couple. They're driving us up. But they didn't tell him who the couple was. They basically just said, it's our friends. And so again, Chandler's sitting there thinking, okay, this whole thing is a little bit weird, but you know what? It's their business. I'm not going to ask about it. They obviously don't want to tell me. And so he just kind of let it go. And so at some point, Bart and Krista, they finish packing and they move all their luggage to the front of the house right near the front door.
Right.
And then a little while later, they and Chandler would retreat to their rooms and they would go to sleep. The next morning, July 2nd, Friday, Chandler got up early at about 6 a.m. And when he got up, he began slowly hobbling his way down the stairs, expecting to see his mom and dad having breakfast and, getting ready to leave because they certainly wouldn't have left without telling him. But he gets downstairs and the house is dark and totally empty, and all of the bags that his parents had packed the night before and put near the front door, they were all gone.
They fucking
and so Chandler's
bail on him?
thinking, did my parents get up at like 5 a.m. and leave without telling me? And so he goes to the door and he looks out the window thinking, maybe they're out there waiting outside. But when he looked outside, his parents weren't out there. And sure enough, their cars were still in the driveway. And so Chandler was left to believe that, well, I guess my parents did get picked up by whoever these friends were, and they did not feel the need to come tell me they were leaving. Now, this did leave Chandler a little bit shaken up. He just kept thinking about the strangeness of what they were packing and the fact that he didn't know who they were going with, and now this sudden departure.
I was going to say that maybe this is the basis behind the fucking TV show Ozark, but Ozark came out before this happened because this was July 2021, right? Like less than 2 years ago.
But again, Chandler just told himself that his parents would be just fine. These are just kind of random anomalies, but they are not indicative of there being any issue here. And so Chandler found a way to just kind of push these concerns out of his mind, and he just went about his day. And so because his parents were now going to be gone for the weekend, he promptly called his girlfriend, Catherine, and asked her to come over and stay at his house with him for a couple of days. And so she comes over, and because Chandler can't really do anything because of his injury, they basically spent the weekend just kind of lounging around and eating nice food and watching Netflix. But by the end of the weekend, on Sunday morning, there was an undertone that both of them noticed that something was wrong. Chandler had told his girlfriend about the strangeness of his parents' quick departure to White Lake.
Sure.
But he had said to her, I'm sure it's fine. And she basically said the same thing, that of course your parents are fine.
It's fine.
But by Sunday, Bart and Krista had still not called or texted or checked in with Chandler or Mitchell or anybody. They were just totally gone and silent. And whenever Chandler or Catherine tried calling Bart or Krista's cell phone, it didn't even ring. It just went straight to voicemail. But by late that day, Sunday, July 4th, when really concerns were starting to mount about what happened to Bart and Krista, Krista would text her son, Chandler. And what she basically said was, hey, we arrived in White Lake. It's packed here. The service is terrible, but we're going to stick around for the parade, and we'll be back either Monday night or Tuesday early. And so as soon as Chandler and Catherine saw this text message, it was like all their worries were completely gone, and they were just excited to see Bart and Krista when they came back the next day or the day after. But the next day, Monday, Bart and Krista did not come home. They didn't call anyone. They didn't text anyone. And again, whenever anybody tried calling their cell phones, which now was Chandler, Catherine, and also Mitchell, who had been looped in on what's going on with his parents, whenever they tried calling them, Bart and Krista's phone didn't ring. It just went straight to voicemail. And then the day after that, on Tuesday, July 6th, so this was the day that Krista said they would be home by, they didn't come home. And again, no one could get in touch with them. And again, they did not contact anyone. Additionally, on Tuesday, Krista's office began calling Chandler and Mitchell, asking if they knew where Krista was. Krista had recently taken up a customer service job at an auto body shop, and apparently she was scheduled to work on that day, Tuesday the 6th, and she was scheduled to work on that previous Friday, which was the day Bart and Krista left for the lake, meaning she had left on this trip without telling anybody at work. And according to her boss, Krista was the type of person who, even if she was running a couple of minutes late, she would call ahead or text ahead and let people know. So for her to just completely not show up and tell no one was totally out of character. But before Chandler, Mitchell, and Catherine could process this information, Bart's employer began calling them, asking the same things. Hey, do you know where Bart is? He's supposed to be working right now, and we can't get in touch with him, and he didn't put in for time off. And so all afternoon on Tuesday the 6th, Chandler, Mitchell, and Catherine and other family members are trying to call Bart and Krista. They're calling other people in White Lake to see if anybody knows where they are, but nobody does. And so finally, the next morning on Wednesday, July 7th, when still there was no word from Bart and Krista, Chandler goes to the police and he files a missing person report. And pretty much right away, the police in Windsor contacted the police up north in White Lake and asked them to do a check on this cabin to see if maybe Bart and Krista were there, and maybe they just had terrible service, or maybe there was some sort of accident or something that happened. But when the White Lake police arrived at the Halderson cabin, Bart and Krista were not there. No one was there. In fact, the cabin looked like it had not been used in months. The outside was totally overgrown, and inside there was no food in the fridge. And interestingly, the police would also tell Chandler, Mitchell, and Catherine that there was no damage done to this cabin. There were no broken windows or any sign, at least no obvious sign, of storm damage to this cabin. And so after this revelation, of course, Bart and Krista's family is like, wait a minute, who called them and told them to head up there to fix these obvious broken windows?
Why'd they bring the cash?
Are those the same mystery friends that drove them up in the first place? I mean, what's going on here? Was this some sort of trap? Have they been set up? Are they okay? And so by the following day, Thursday, July 8th, when still there was no sign of Bart or Krista, and the police really didn't have any new leads to speak of, Chandler was desperate. And so he went to local media and he said, please run a story about my parents and get the word out there that they're missing, and maybe someone knows something and they'll come forward. And so local media, they would do that. They would run this piece. And so while this media coverage is going on the 8th, Chandler would go back to his home and he would hobble door to door asking each of his neighbors if they had a security camera on the front of their house that might have picked up an angle of the street, and so may have seen his parents on the morning of July 2nd when they climbed into that mystery couple's car that took them up to White Lake. Chandler was hoping that if he got this footage, somebody would be able to identify who these mystery friends were. But unfortunately, none of his neighbors had that footage. But as it would turn out, it didn't matter, because on that day, the 8th, the police made a discovery that at first seemed relatively minor, relatively small, but when they examined it more closely, they realized it was a huge discovery, and it completely broke the case wide open. To understand this breakthrough, we have to go back to June 29th, 2021. So 3 days before Bart and Krista hopped into that mystery person's car and headed up to White Lake. On that day, June 29th, Bart had finally just had it. There had been something bothering him for a really long time, and he had just finally decided, you know what? Today, I'm going to get to the bottom of it. And so Bart pulled out his phone, he punched in a number, he put it to his ear, and after a few rings, a young man named Omar Job answered his call. In total, Bart and Omar would talk on the phone for a total of 17 minutes. And for the first half of the call, it was basically just Bart being really angry and aggressive towards Omar. But then during the second half of the call, when Omar really had a chance to speak for the first time, Bart's tone completely changed. He was no longer angry. He actually sounded totally defeated. And so after this 17-minute phone call finally comes to an end, Bart is left kind of in shock, but he knows he now needs to set up an even more intense meeting with a group of people, and he needs to tell them what he just learned from Omar. And within 24 hours, Bart had set this additional high-stakes meeting with this other group. It was set for 3 p.m. on July 1st. July 1st was the day before.
What the fuck is going on with Bart? What the fuck did Bart get into where he's got all this cash and silver, man?
And Krista would leave for White Lake. And so on July 1st, the day of this new pivotal meeting, Bart was working from home, and at some point he looked at his watch and he saw it was just after 2 p.m. And even though this meeting he was going to have was still an hour away, the location of the meeting was a bit of a drive away, and so he knew he needed to leave soon. And so Bart stopped working and he texted Chandler, who was in the house with him. He just said, ready to leave when you are. Chandler was aware of how important this meeting was for his dad. He also understood the terrible position his dad was in. And so he had agreed to go with his dad to this meeting. And so after a couple of minutes, both Chandler and Bart have gotten dressed and ready for this meeting, and they met downstairs on the first floor, and after kind of a nod to each other, they begin walking towards the front door. But then something happens. Chandler was standing behind Bart, and so as they're moving towards the door, Chandler reaches out and grabs a rifle he was hiding on the first floor.
How do we get
he
here?
He raises it and he fires at least 2 shots into his father's back. And then once his father fell to the ground and was either dead or dying, Chandler, calm as can be, pulled out his phone and he texted his mother and told her, hey, Dad's phone is dead, so just text me. And then Chandler also sent his mother a text saying, get soda on your way home. To which his mother just wrote, "K, I can," smiley face. All Chandler was trying to do was buy as much time as possible to prep the house for his mother's return. And so over the next couple of hours, we don't know exactly what Chandler did, but it's assumed he moved his father's body into some hiding place, and then after maybe trying to clean up a little bit, Chandler laid in wait for his mother. And at 4:58 p.m., Krista would clock out of her job at the automotive shop. She would make a pit stop at a store to buy Chandler some soda.
Is
and
Chandler
then
the
between
fucked up
5:15
one?
and 5:30, security cameras
that
on
Mitchell?
neighbors' houses would pick her up pulling into her driveway. And then just a couple of minutes later, she walked inside of her beautiful little dream home where she had raised her family over the past couple of decades, only to be immediately gunned down by her son the second she walked inside.
How did no one hear
It would
those
turn
gunshots?
out Chandler was living a double life. He had never graduated from college. He had gone to college, but for like a semester and flunked out. But he just kept telling his friends and family that he was progressing through college and then he graduated from college, all made up. He also did not have a job at the insurance company. He just told his family that he worked from home, which really meant he sat in his room and played video games all day. He was not a rescue scuba diver for the Madison Police Department because 1, he was not a scuba diver, and 2, because the Madison Police Department did not have a rescue scuba diving team. And
What the
needless
fuck?
to say, he did not have a job with SpaceX. He had never even applied. As for his head injury, he may have bumped his head at some point, and he did go to the doctors by himself sometime in mid-June. But
This kid's a
that
piece
doctor
of
just
shit.
told him he might have a mild concussion and then offered him a neck brace and told him, you don't need to wear it. That's only if you want to wear it. But then very quickly, Chandler turned this non-injury into a debilitating, crippling, life-altering injury and literally hobbled all around with a neck brace and cane. And the reason he did that is he needed an excuse for why he wasn't starting his job at SpaceX. In short, Chandler lied about virtually every aspect of his life to virtually everyone in his life. And for the most part, people did believe
Guy
him.
should run for
However,
Congress.
his parents
Those amount of
were
lies.
becoming more and more suspicious. Specifically, in 2021, he was telling them, oh yeah, I'm working at the insurance company, but he never had any money. He could barely pay rent to his family, if at all. And so his dad would say to him, how is it you are employed but have no money? And the way Chandler would handle this is he would create fake email accounts pretending to be people in HR at this insurance company, and then acting as them, he would write these convoluted emails that had these ridiculous
What the
excuses
fuck?
for why Chandler had not been paid yet. And so he would have that fake email account email his real account, and then Chandler in his actual email would write back really angrily and sternly saying,
Well, it
you
would've
gotta
been
fix
easier
this,
to
my
just get a
family's not
job.
happy. And then he would once again pretend to be the HR person who would say, I'm sorry, it's some issue that you can't affect, we're gonna fix it, but you gotta wait. And Chandler would take these exchanges and he would forward them to his father. And while Bart didn't necessarily totally believe what he was being shown, it was enough to get him to stop asking questions. But Bart and Krista were also suspicious of other aspects of Chandler's life, like for example, his school records. At some point, he needed to show them his transcripts, and he would tell them, oh, you know, I can't access my transcripts. And so Bart and Krista are like, why? Can't you just log in and pull up your unofficial transcripts at least? And the way Chandler would handle this was the same way he handled the insurance company. He would create fictitious email accounts of people that were college advisors at Madison College, where he claimed to have gone and graduated from, and he would do those phony back and forths where it looked like the college was telling Chandler, sorry, you can't get your transcripts. It's this huge problem that's totally our fault, not yours, but you just gotta wait. There's nothing else you can do. We can't get them for you right now. And when Chandler would send these exchanges to Bart, Bart would get totally worked up about it, and finally he demanded that Chandler give him a phone number so he can talk to one of these college advisors. And so Chandler went out and got a burner phone from a convenience store, and he gave that phone number to his dad, and then when his dad called this number up, somebody picked up, someone introducing themselves as Daniel Spieth, which really was just Chandler disguising his voice, and Daniel Spieth would give Bart the same spiel about how, oh, I'm so sorry, it's all the college's fault that we can't get your son's transcripts, you're just gonna have to wait. And so finally, on June 29th, 2021, Bart had just had it with his son. He was convinced his son was lying, or there was something going on, there was just too much about his son's life that didn't add up. And so Bart decided he was just going to call Madison College and pretend to be Chandler and see if he could get his transcripts. And so he dialed a number for customer service at Madison College, and after a few rings, Omar Job, a customer service rep at Madison College, picked up. And initially, Bart was kind of aggressive and mean towards Omar for really no reason other than he was just so frustrated with this whole situation. And so he's on this call pretending to be Chandler, and he's kind of barking at Omar to give me my transcripts right now. I go to your school. There's no reason you can keep them from me. But then after a couple of minutes, Omar finally was able to talk. And he said, you know, hey, Chandler, I looked you up in the system and you don't go to this school. You've never gone to the school, save for maybe one semester, and you failed out. And so it's at this point when Bart hears this that he just pauses for a really long amount of time on this call, and then he begins asking follow-up questions that are not really connected to trying to get transcripts, because now he knows the transcripts don't exist because his son didn't go to school. And so he begins asking Omar, does Daniel Spieth still work there? And so Omar would look him up and he would say, no, there's no Daniel Spieth that works here, and there's no Daniel Spieth that's ever worked here.
There's no
and because
Daniel
Chandler
Spieth in the
had
house.
used like 5 or 6 different names when pretending to be college advisors for Madison College, Bart, in addition to asking about that Daniel Spieth guy, asked about every other name he had interacted with, believing he was talking to Madison College, and one by one, Omar told him, I'm sorry, those people do not work here. I've never heard of these people. They're not in the directory. I'm sorry. And so finally, at the end of that 17-minute call, Bart knew his son was living a huge lie. And so he hung up with Omar, and then Bart called real college advisors at Madison College, and he set a meeting for July 1st at 3 p.m. And then he told Chandler that he had set this meeting, and Chandler was going to come with him, and they together were going to ask those college advisors why they can't produce Chandler's transcripts. Now, Bart, of course, knew Chandler did not have transcripts, and so he likely had set this meeting to get Chandler to call the meeting off and come clean about this big lie so that Bart could get his son back on the right track, stop lying, and live a real life. But the way Chandler handled being caught was not to own up to any of this. He didn't call off the meeting. He just waited until the day of the meeting, and then he killed his father, killed his mother, and then dismembered their bodies and burned their body parts in the family fireplace, including their heads. And then when he couldn't destroy their bodies completely, he took what was left of their remains and scattered them all over town in parks and forests and rivers. He even put his father's headless, armless, legless torso behind his girlfriend's parents' house. And all the while, as he's doing this, he's spinning this ridiculous story to his girlfriend, to his brother, to other members of the Halderson family, to police, to colleagues of Bart and Krista, that Bart and Krista just up and left on the morning of July 2nd with this mystery couple. And oh, by the way, my parents, they were putting cash and silver bars in their luggage. So I don't know, they went up to White Lake and now they're gone. I don't know what happened to them. We don't know why Chandler chose the story he did. It's unclear if he was trying to make it seem like his parents were suspicious and had gotten into something that had maybe gotten them harmed or kidnapped, or if he was trying to make it seem like his parents were just super gullible and had been taken advantage of by this mystery couple. We don't know. He was just trying to make the whole situation seem plausibly suspicious. Ultimately, though, Chandler did so many things that got him caught. From the mountain of physical evidence he left behind inside of his house, where he killed and dismembered his parents, and also at the various dump sites where he didn't even bury the body parts. He would just put them underneath sticks and branches, and so they were very easy to find. To his extremely suspicious behavior on July 7th when he walked into the police station and reported his parents missing. That whole time he was talking to police officers, he was acting so weird and was just saying things that didn't make sense, and he just totally came off like a guy who did not care at all that his parents were gone, and really just seemed like a guy who was hiding something. But the big breakthrough that happened on July 8th that broke the case open stemmed from the text message Krista's phone sent to Chandler's phone on July 4th. When Chandler walked into the police station on July 7th and said, "My parents are missing," one of the first questions they had for him was, "Okay, well, when was the last time you spoke to your parents?" And Chandler would tell them he got a text message from his mother, Krista, on Sunday, July 4th. And then he showed them the text message. And the text message said that they had arrived in White Lake and they were going to be sticking around for the parade and they'd be back in a couple of days. But the police noticed that this text message had been sent on July 4th, but in White Lake that year, the parade was on July 3rd. So when this text came through, the parade that anyone in White Lake would be aware of, it's a small place, you're not going to miss this parade. The parade had already happened. So why would Krista be texting her son that she was going to stick around in White Lake for the parade that had already happened? And so this led police to check phone records, and they would discover that text message was sent from Krista's phone to Chandler's phone, but when it was sent on July 4th, Krista's phone was not in White Lake. Instead, it was inside of the Halderson home, right near Chandler's
in the house.
And so when
this
police
kid is
went
dumb
to
as
the
fuck.
Halderson house, they searched it and they found Krista's phone in the garage underneath a drawer inside of a shoe wrapped in tinfoil next to her driver's license. And so Chandler had obviously sent that text message on July 4th using his mother's phone to himself. But he had just gotten the date wrong of the parade. And so this discrepancy really opened up the floodgates, and before long, it was beyond obvious that Chandler was the killer. And after a thorough investigation, it was determined that Chandler had acted entirely alone, meaning Catherine, his girlfriend, and his brother Mitchell had nothing to do with it. They were just innocent bystanders. Chandler would ultimately be found guilty of killing his parents, and he would be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Chandler has still not taken any responsibility for what he's done.
Why not?
Instead, he just tells anybody who will listen that his plan is to continue to appeal his verdict. So that's going to do it. If you got something out of today,
I feel like that was one of the shittier fucking stories. Like, legit. Let's see. I had one more I want to do, but I'm already getting tired. Let's see if we can find it. I was one more. It's like 3 stories. It's not this one. Crazy Neighbor Secret. We just did that one. We did. All right. So it's this one. Some more from this Nick Crowley. This one is. How long are we? I think it's worth doing. Hang on. Okay. I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties, guys. Bear with me. You ever notice I'm always having a little bit of technical difficulties? There's a reason for that. All right. Let's try this one, and then we're going to call it a day. We might call it a weekend at that point.
Nature gathering its forces for still another unending assault on man.
1-800 Embassy for It sounds like it came right out of a zombie movie.
Computers are living in homes with basements. Go below and stay below ground level.
Tornado warning.
April 9th, 2015, a tornado begins to form during the evening hours in the small town of Franklin Grove, Illinois, quickly growing larger and larger by the minute to the point of reaching an unprecedented size for the area. Miles away in the town of Fairdale, 67-year-old Geraldine Schultz spotted the vortex forming in the distance. Worried, she called her husband Clem into the kitchen, where the two would stand watching the tornado out their window. For the couple, tornadoes were nothing new, and Clem was quickly able to determine that the storm would likely miss them to the east. But just to be safe, he went upstairs to grab some lanterns, in the likely event of a power outage. Upon doing so, Clem would catch a glimpse of the tornado outside the bedroom window, having grown significantly closer. Its wind speeds were well over 200 miles an hour, and having been classified as an EF4, it was the largest twister the area had ever seen. In awe of its size, Clem began to record out the window, still certain that the storm was heading east.
Clarence Clem Schultz, baby.
But unfortunately, he was wrong. And in reality, the powerful storm was heading directly towards him.
Uh-oh, Clem.
By the time Clem would realize this, it was far too late. There was no time to run, and not a chance to hide. All he could do was stand there helplessly
I don't know why people
and
fucking
watch.
do this shit. It's so stupid. Did you fucking imagine? Did you fucking imagine this shit? He's still filming. Hopefully that's like a stationary camera and he's hiding. Clem, hide! Get in the bathtub.
It was a direct hit, as the EF4 tornado tore through the house before Clem could even say a word, quickly turning the home that had once stood there for 100 years to dust and rubble. And buried beneath it all was Clem, along with his wife of 25 years.
God damn.
They got fire rescue on the way.
Against all odds, Clem would somehow survive, pulling himself up from the field of debris.
Where's his wife?
It was a storm that would go on to destroy numerous homes and take the lives of two people, one of whom was Clem's neighbor and good friend Jacqueline Closa, who lived in the house that Clem had filmed being destroyed just moments before it struck him, and the other being Geraldine, Clem's wife and best friend. Days following the disaster, a family member who had been searching the area for anything salvageable would stumble across Clem's phone, which miraculously was still working. And on it would be the now infamous video that showed the point of view of a man being struck head-on by a tornado, and somehow surviving. The imagery, the sounds, and the context make this clip one of the most shocking I have ever seen, as well as one of the darkest across all of YouTube.
The tornado has passed. Capricious.
I can't imagine being. I've been in an earthquake because I'm from California and I grew up in Southern California, but I couldn't imagine that shit.
Before we move on to the next video, I want to briefly thank today's sponsor, Casetify. I, like many of you out there, have had a long history of dropping my phone and cracking the screen, which is a pain to fix and not to mention very expensive. Microbial coating, which kills
A new high-tech way to find out who's at the door.
With a video doorbell, you'll never miss a visitor.
In the past few years, the world has seen a boom in the use of doorbell cameras, mainly because of instances like this.
Oh, they got a camera. Oh, they got a camera. Oh, they got a camera.
Capturing and exposing criminals in the act, from the most petty of thieves all the way to attempted murderers and kidnappers. Due to their knack for capturing disturbing encounters, the videos that have emerged from these devices have practically carved out their own genre here on YouTube, to the point that many, including myself, have almost become desensitized to them. But recently, a video began making the rounds showing the events that transpired at a Las Vegas home on the evening of July 21st, 2021, and it proved to be one of the most chilling I have ever seen. It happened around 8 p.m., where a young lady
Potatoes?
had been working in her kitchen, waiting for her husband to return home from work. It was another 100-degree day in Vegas, and likely in an attempt to
Fucking
cool
every day's
down,
100
she would
degrees in
open her
Vegas.
window to let the evening breeze in. Unbeknownst to her, this harmless decision would lead to a terrifying series of events. Outside of the home, a man had been wandering the suburban streets aimlessly, roaming throughout the neighborhood before stopping in his tracks. In front of him was the open window and a clear view of the woman inside. It was a chance sighting that would lead to the man approaching the house and ringing the doorbell, where the camera would begin to record.
Are you sure? I just rang your doorbell because I have a couple questions for you.
Nope. Fuck you. Go away.
Are you sure?
Oh, positive, sir.
I just rang your doorbell because I have a couple questions for you. Are you sure? What? Are you sure?
Dude, 911.
I just rang your doorbell because I have a couple questions for you.
911, dude. What are you doing?
The man stands there ringing the doorbell and knocking at the door, repeating the same sentences over and over again, calmly stating that he just wants to ask a few questions. However, the woman inside had never met this man. In fact, she had never seen him before this moment. And to make it all stranger, she didn't respond to anything the man was saying, and was out of his line of view as he peeked through the door. So the phrases that he was saying were not in response to anyone, and instead, he was speaking to himself. Fearing for her safety, the woman inside didn't open the door or engage him at all, leading the man to take things a step further.
Are you positive?
Oh, she's
I just
positive.
have a couple questions for you. Are you sure? Are you positive? Are you sure? Are you absolutely certain?
This fucking
He
guy.
begins trying to open the door, but thankfully it was locked, causing the strange man to start walking away, cursing under his breath. The footage is incredibly off-putting, and although the man seems to stay perfectly calm, there was something very aggressive and erratic about the way
he's
he was
crazy as
speaking,
fuck. He's gonna murder
making
your
one
whole
wonder what
life.
his true intentions were when he approached the house. As the man begins to walk away, the woman's husband, still at work, would chime in through the doorbell after noticing the situation begin to unfold, which in turn would lead to the man revealing why he was ringing the doorbell.
So who are you?
What? Yeah? Are you sure?
Who are you?
Hey, I just had a couple questions. I just wanted to ask you about TV show. Yeah, can you hear me? What I'm looking for is for the girl that's in the house to come out here because I'm going to rape her and kill her.
Whoa!
Rape and kill the girl that's on the other side of this door when she lets me in.
It was no secret what he had planned for that evening. He outright says it, even revealing that he had the weapons to make it happen.
I want to rape her and kill her because I have a knife and a gun. And I'm going to knock on her door again.
If that woman had opened the door, or if that door had been unlocked,
What the fuck?
well, we know what would have happened. But thankfully, neither of those situations played out, and instead, the man walked away muttering the same phrases over and over again.
Yeah. What?
Even staring at the house for a few moments before finally disappearing into the night. Police were called to the area moments later, but the man was nowhere to be found. As quickly as he had entered this couple's life, he was now gone, leaving them with the reality that at any moment, he could return. Scared for her life, the lady posted the clip online, where it would quickly go viral across YouTube, which honestly may have ended up saving a life. The following day, a viewer of the video would recognize the same man walking in another residential area, in one that was not too far away from the house where the encounter took place. And after the police were called, the man would be quickly arrested before he could play out his disturbing fantasy.
We'll see his
When
mugshot.
confronted and asked for his name, the man would simply state that he was the Holy Spirit and said nothing more. Though his real name was revealed to be Christopher Sums, a man who had passed charges of stealing, assaulting, and intimidating a witness, with his mugshot being nothing short of completely haunting. But what I found most surprising was the fact that he
That's the fucking most evil looking motherfucker. Oh my god, that fucking had me.
didn't always look like this. In fact, just a few years ago, he looked completely normal. And according to his LinkedIn, he had a fairly impressive work history and what seemed to be a good life. Until for whatever reason, things spiraled in the wrong direction.
You think?
As it stands, Christopher is being evaluated to see if he is mentally fit to stand trial, as many believe that he likely suffers from some kind of psychological condition, hence the repeating phrases and the strange behavior. Though his blatant and rapid change in appearance might also point to heavy drug use or even a combination of both. But regardless of what was behind his behavior that day, the situation and the subsequent video is haunting and could have been so much worse had that door been opened.
Are you sure?
Oh, we're sure. Fucking knucklehead. Okay,
YouTube is a site that draws in people from all walks of life, each with their own unique motivation for starting up their channels. Some are in it for the money and the fame, while others are in it for the love of creating content. But sprinkled throughout the site are a select few who come here to feel heard and to get something off their chest. Something that for 27-year-old Tebebe Mukanin would be his primary motivation for posting his first and only video on March 17th, 2018. Tebebe had struggled his whole life with mental illness, suffering from both schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. These mental illnesses led to an event in 2013 where he would wander off from his home unprovoked. Outside, he began to walk for miles, essentially in a daze, before finding himself in what he described as a very dangerous part of town. Thankfully, Tebebe would be safely found before anything had happened to him, but this incident would prove to be life-changing, as it would lead to his hospitalization due to his unpredictable and dangerous behavior. This would also start a long spell of being given heavy medication to help with his schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Over the course of the next 4 years, Tebebe would find himself in and out of the hospital and prescribed a variety of powerful antipsychotic drugs, something that would consume his life as he felt like he was no longer in control of his actions. And feeling trapped, he would turn to YouTube to share his story.
We all been there.
Hello, this is Tebebe Mukanin. I'm talking and putting this video because I wanted to bring awareness to a situation.
Okay, they said this is his first and only video
that I'm dealing with that's very painful. I was hospitalized June 25th, 2013. I went there to supposedly get an IV. I ended up being forced to take medication. And it was pure hell. They gave me Haldol, Risperidol, and they were forcing antipsychotics down my throat. It was absolute torture and hell.
In the 10-minute video, Tebebe made it clear that he was not consenting to this medical treatment, and he explained how the medication he was forced to take made him feel like a zombie, even saying that it had gotten so bad that he had thoughts of taking his own life.
It was bad. It was really bad, and I had suicidal ideation.
Throughout the clip, Tebebe comes across as intelligent and well-spoken, but traces of his illness shine through periodically. For instance, he explains how immediately after being released from the hospital on multiple occasions, he would wander away from his home, even attempting to be homeless for a while admitting that he didn't know why this was an issue, or why it would always lead to him going back to the hospital.
I got off, and I think I had another episode as they like to say, where I said I wanted to be homeless. That's it. All I said was I wanted to be homeless. So, and I proceeded to be homeless.
Why?
Next thing I know, the cops came and they arrested me and they took me back to the hospital. Then after that, I left and I tried to be homeless again, and I was hospitalized again.
But things would be further escalated as Tebebe casually explains how he has violent outbursts, even resorting to punching multiple people who were trying to give him medication, as well as starving himself in retaliation.
So I started getting violent, and I started punching people, and I started attacking people in the hospital, and they had to tie me down. I began to lash out like, I'm going to protest this. I'm going to starve myself as a way of hopefully stopping this ridiculous forced treatment for absolutely nothing.
And by the end of the video, Tebebe flat out explains that he does not have any sort of mental illness, or have any symptoms for that matter, calling what was happening to him an injustice.
I guess I'm just trying to let you guys know the injustice that goes on.
It's a truly depressing situation, as on one hand he is being forced to take medication that essentially makes him feel dead inside, while on the other hand it seems very apparent that treatment is necessary to not only keep others around him, but...
Alright, we'll get back to Tebebe. These donuts that she gets are amazing. This one, can you see it? It's an Oreo donut. This is the fattest thing you'll ever eat in your fucking life. It's flaky inside, tastes like a donut, but flaky like a croissant. Let me show you. All right. I'm gonna break it up. Oh, it's so messy. So much sugar. Look at that thing. Okay. I'm gonna go back to the video. I'm gonna mute while I eat.
Safe, as he doesn't seem fully aware of how serious some of his actions are. Tebebe concluded the video by asking those watching what they thought of his situation, and though it didn't garner many views, a select few would stumble upon it and agree with his stance that the treatment he was receiving was unlawful, with many insinuating that he should continue to protest and not...
It's so fucking good, guys. The Oreo donut.
Take his medication. These comments are unfortunately no longer available, as just a few weeks ago the video was removed, but they had been reflected across multiple sites as people called out the commenters for essentially trying to convince someone to go off his medication cold turkey, and doing so without knowing the true extent of his medical history, which obviously is irresponsible and potentially very dangerous. But unfortunately, these conflicting viewpoints came years later, and in that time surrounding the video's release, Tebebe had likely found the verification he was looking for. He was going to keep protesting his medication. This video would be the first and last that we would ever hear from Tebebe, but it wouldn't be the last we'd hear of him. Just 2 months following the video, Tebebe would make the local news after having an encounter at the hospital. There, a therapist entered his room to talk with him, when suddenly Tebebe snapped, grabbing her and refusing to let go, while performing lewd gestures toward her, and eventually pinning her on the ground, refusing to let her go. The situation led to Tebebe being arrested for sexual battery, but no jail time was ever given, as instead, a plea deal was reached where Tebebe agreed to stay in the hospital, and most importantly, he agreed to go back on his medication and take it as prescribed. It's this note that hints at the idea that he had likely gone off his medication before this incident, something that would have directly led to his violent outburst. And given the event's proximity to the video that he had just posted, and the comments supporting his desire to stop taking his medication, it's not hard to theorize that Tebebe may have cut off his meds due to the advice of his comment section, or at the very least was further convinced that it was the right thing to do. Regardless, it seemed clear that the inconsistencies with his medication had caused him to lose control, and this wouldn't be the last time. In the summer of
I'm just telling you, if I ever get a good comment section and you guys tell me to go off my meds, I'm not fucking listening to you at all.
2019, Tebebe was staying at an Embassy Suites hotel with his mother Zalem Abje, who had been caring for him around the clock. He had been moved there from the hospital as part of his treatment plan, as it kept him close by and easy to monitor regularly, but it also made him free of being cooped up in a hospital room, which clearly he didn't enjoy. The change of scenery was likely supposed to calm Tebebe and his growing anger issues, but unfortunately, his violent outbursts did not stop there. On August 20th at 1:30 a.m., Tebebe would get into an altercation with his mother in their hotel room. It's not clear what had started the argument, but things would quickly turn physical, as Tebebe started to shove his mother, pushing her so hard that it would knock her out of the room, and then onto their balcony. Their room was on one of the top floors of the hotel, and it overlooked the lobby down below, and in one more violent outburst, Tebebe would give one final push, this time knocking her all the way over the railing, causing her to plummet to the ground below. She did not survive the impact. Tebebe Mokanen was arrested at the scene and held at a holding center where he remains to this day awaiting his trial, though his crime is clear and it's likely he will spend the rest of his life either behind bars or in some kind of institution.
You guys, I finished the donut. I ate the whole thing. Holy fuck, that thing's good. I told her, oops, I'll be right back. I told Cassandra she gets these donuts and she like DoorDashes them. I told her she can never tell me the name of this donut place. They got all these crazy good donuts. They're amazing. I told her she can never tell me the name of the donut place because I'll fucking find it. I know me. It's better. She has to control the donuts because I don't have any fucking self-control at all. None. Zero. And so if she controls the donuts and I don't know the name of the place, I'm lazy enough I won't put in the work to find out where it is. Say, I know this about myself. I'm pretty self-aware. I won't put in the work to try and find the place on my own, right? But if I know the name of it, then I'm a little closer to doing that. If I know where it's located, I'm going to fucking stop there on my own and just fucking get a donut whenever I want. Take off from work, go get a fucking donut. But I don't know it. I won't let her tell me. She's made a pact not to tell me the name of the place, and I don't look it up. And then she controls the donuts, and that's how we get through the donut situation. Anyways, back to Tebebe.
The events that happened on that fateful morning are still somewhat unknown to this day, though we do know the events that led up to it, and the years of hurt and anger that Tebebe had built up, as well as his inconsistent and dangerous use of antipsychotics, which, unsurprisingly, it appears that he had again attempted to take himself off of his meds in the time surrounding his murderous fit, with this being used as the likely reason for his behavior that day. Something that was telegraphed in one single video, which, looking back, almost foreshadows the tragic events that were soon to come. Events that may have been further spurred on by the viewers watching him.
Miracle happened right out of a zombie.
Do we just, coming on 2 hours.
Our next video takes us across the world to the Philippines in mid-July 2014.
This is what I set out to do.
The story begins on a tragic note, as a family says their goodbyes to their 3-year-old daughter.
Okay.
In the days prior, the young girl had developed a severe fever, and without access to an up-to-date medical facility, she would pass away in the morning hours on July 12th. With no pulse and no heartbeat, the little girl was pronounced dead and taken home to prepare for the funeral, which would be held the next day. It was obviously a somber event, as the girl was placed in her casket and the lid was shut. Family members and loved ones gathered around to celebrate the short life of a child who deserved so much more, and watch as she was placed into the ground, which would be her final resting place. But before that would happen, one of the neighbors had been in charge of arranging the young girl's body before burial. Though something strange happened when he went to do so. Inside the coffin, the young girl's head began to move. It was a slight twitch, but in a panic, the neighbor checked for a pulse only to discover that her heart was still beating, and the young girl was breathing. one of the family members begins to record as the sudden wave of realization hits that the child was actually alive.
What the fuck?
It's the ultimate case of what if. Had that person not opened the casket to reposition the body, then that little girl would have been buried alive, and no one would have ever known. It's a clip that I'm sure many of you have seen by now, as the original video itself has garnered over 1 million views. And topping that, a news station that covered the story currently sits with 25 million views. It's one of the more viral horror stories that I've ever seen on YouTube, as seemingly everyone knows about this infamous video. And rightfully so. I mean, it's one of the craziest stories I have ever seen, both on YouTube or in the news. But the only problem is, this viral video didn't tell the whole story. The story itself does in fact appear to be true, having been confirmed by Philippine officials who admitted that a mistake had been made in that particular hospital, which led to the mix-up and almost to the mistaken burial. But the story doesn't have the happy ending that many of us thought, as in reality, that child never actually woke up. She did have a pulse and shallow breathing, but she would never regain consciousness and remained in a comatose state. In fact, just 2 days after this video was taken, and on the 15th of July, she would once again be pronounced dead, this time for real. But looking back on the viral video viewed by millions, the anchors say that she was fine, calling it a miracle.
Happy tears, knowing that thankfully she's fine. I'm glad they opened that casket to check to move around.
Now, it may be possible that they just didn't know this at the time, as based off of the way they're talking, it seems like the report would have came out the day or the day after the child was found alive. Only, that's not true either, as the child was determined to be alive on the 13th of July, and once again pronounced dead on the 15th, just 2 days later. Yet this video was published a full month later, on August 13th, 2014. So when this video went live, that little girl was long gone. And this is something that they likely knew, as it had been well reported in other major news outlets on the day of her actual passing. I mean, nowadays, even the top Google result for this incident mentions her passing, and it came out on the very day it happened. So when this video went live, they had to have known it wasn't true.
Good God.
What started on its own as one of the darkest videos on the site has now become even more twisted as the true ending has been revealed. A miracle that turned out to be nothing more than a mirage, leading to even more heartbreak as the family was now forced to grieve and come to terms with this girl's passing twice. And it's made even worse by the news report that has essentially rewritten the story's ending. But looking at just the video and the story as is, of how everything unfolded, it's still truly horrifying that this little girl was almost buried alive, whether she was conscious or not. And it makes me wonder how many others have been in that dreadful situation, buried alive by mistake. The answer to that question is one that we'll quite literally never know, since it is sealed within the claustrophobic walls of a dark coffin, with no hope of escape.
And that's the end.
Alright, this is the last one and we're calling it a day.
Coming your way.
Divorce is often one of the more traumatic experiences that a young child can go through, as many are left in a state of confusion and distress at such a tumultuous time in their life. And for a young man named Daniel Bartlam, his childhood was sadly no different. Growing up in Nottinghamshire, England, Daniel's parents, Jackie and Adrian, would separate following the birth of Daniel's younger brother, with the situation leading to a split in the family, as the young boys would move to a new home with their mother. This brought Daniel to an unfamiliar town, as well as a brand new school, and to top it all off, Daniel's mother would soon find a new partner, further adding to the confusion that Daniel must have been feeling. All of these circumstances would lead Daniel to a declining mental state as he began to isolate himself in his room, barely speaking to his family. Daniel's mother Jackie was well aware of the change in his behavior, and she soon thought of the perfect way to bring him out of this depression. So
Beans
she
on
saved
toast.
up some money on the side until she eventually had enough to buy Daniel his very own iMac, a computer that he had been asking for years. At the time, Daniel had a vested interest in technology, even having his own YouTube channel dedicated to the topic. But this new computer meant an upgrade in quality and a future with limitless possibilities. Overjoyed, Daniel quickly began a new channel and dedicated his very first upload to his new device.
Hello YouTube, this is Daniel AB1702 here, and it's finally happened. I now have an iMac, and I can now make bigger and better videos.
The video is clearly nothing too special, as the quality is about what you would expect from a kid his age who was just starting out. And the following videos were much the same, with these uploads simply being compilations from a show he liked. It all may not have seemed like much, but this computer, along with this new channel, seemed to be the spark that he so badly needed, a new passion and a new outlook on life. But strangely, after just a few uploads, the account would go silent. This is something that happens all the time on YouTube, where a creator starts posting with high aspirations before abandoning their work, and it's typically due to a lack of success or just the overall busyness of life. But in Daniel's case, his reason for leaving was far darker, as right around the time of his last upload, he would experience the ultimate tragedy. On the morning of April 25th, 2011, neighbors of Daniel had reported hearing a commotion coming from his home. That commotion would soon turn to chaos, as the house suddenly erupted into flames, with smoke billowing out all sides. Through the commotion, Daniel would emerge from the home with his little brother and dog in hand, but his mother was nowhere to be found. Police and fire units arrived at the scene quickly, but were already too late, as inside the home they would find the badly burned and disfigured body of Jackie. And surprisingly, they'd soon notice that it wasn't the fire that had done her in, but rather she had been brutally murdered with what appeared to be a hammer. The scene was shocking and incredibly chaotic, but luckily Daniel had been there to explain everything.
I bet.
According to the child, a masked burglar had entered the home before confronting his mother. The confrontation then led to the anonymous person attacking Jackie with a hammer, causing her to collapse to the floor. He then says the intruder lit her body on fire, leading Daniel to grab his brother and dog and escape from the blaze, saving what remained of his family as the murderer escaped out the back.
And he saved his iMac.
Daniel's story stood out for several reasons, mainly because it showed Daniel was a hero for saving his brother and dog, and it showed just how traumatic that morning must have been for him, as in the matter of one day, Daniel had lost his home and his mother in probably the most devastating way imaginable. But his story also stood out for one other reason, with that reason being in regards to the killer. As police began their investigation, they searched and searched for any clues left behind from this supposed masked intruder, but they found nothing. No fingerprints, no footprints, no anything. And looking for any semblance of a lead, they started to search through Daniel's room, where through the charred remains, they miraculously found his computer in perfect working order.
Weird!
Authorities would search the child's device when they stumbled upon something rather bizarre. It was a story that Daniel had typed months before in a Word document that was set as the scene of a soap opera that he had been writing. The story read, Daniel Bartlam, 1997 to 2047, the longest-serving male character to be on the show. The only place he couldn't get away with his deeds was with his mother, Jackie. Whoa. So one evening, he made it look as though it was a break-in, and murdered his mother with a hammer, and then set her and the family home alight, but helped his brother out to safety, and got his neighbors to contact the police. The story ends with Daniel lying to the police and getting away with murder. It was a shocking revelation, as his mother had been killed with a hammer and set on fire through what Daniel had described as a break-in, just as his story was written. And to make it all stranger, further investigation would reveal that in the days prior to Jackie's death, Daniel had attempted to delete the document, though he had failed to fully remove it. And the findings went deeper, as countless screenshots and clips of a character from a show called Coronation Street were found on the hard drive, with it appearing as though Daniel had an obsession with this character, which proved to be rather interesting, as the character, John Stape, was a villain who had murdered another character with a claw hammer, the same weapon used on his mother. Investigators would keep
Where's the dad and the stepdad in all this?
Until they eventually found the nail in the coffin, as it was revealed that in the days prior to the attack, Daniel had searched how to get away with murder. With a slew of information and the lack of evidence that a break-in had ever occurred, Daniel's story quickly fell apart, until he eventually admitted the gruesome truth that he had been the one who had taken his mother's life. On the 24th of April, Daniel would spend the night in his room rewatching one of his favorite Saw movies. He then emerged from the room carrying a claw hammer and approached his sleeping mother. He proceeded to strike her 7 times in the face before eventually setting her body on fire and escaping the home with his brother and dog, acting as the hero who had quote-unquote saved the day, when in reality it was all his doing. And the entire series of events had been plotted out on the very computer that his mother gave him, the same computer that he had so excitedly made this video on just months before the attack.
This is what happens when you don't get enough views, guys.
To this day, we don't really know why Daniel chose to attack his mother, as any reason he's given has been fairly easily disproven, with many chalking it up to his tumultuous childhood, though we have learned more information about his early years, with many of these stories proving to be incredibly disturbing, and hinting at the idea that Daniel was mentally unwell. For instance, it was said that he had an obsession with gruesome movies and games that seemed to inspire his own violent thoughts, as he began watching these graphic films at the age of 8. He took these films as inspiration to start writing his own stories, which almost always ended in death and murder, and the details of which were said to be incredibly intense. And in a much darker example, about 6 weeks before the murder, during a normal day at school, Daniel began desperately yanking at his tie, insisting that it was trying to strangle him. When further asked about this, he then revealed that he was hearing voices, and those voices were telling him to hurt people. But surprisingly, after being given a psychiatric evaluation, the counselor told his mother that there was nothing wrong with Daniel. But to be on the safe side, they did offer counseling that Jackie would quickly deny, a decision that, for her, may have ultimately proven fatal. Whatever made Daniel snap that day, it was seemingly a long time coming. And despite his young age, he would be sentenced to life in prison, with a chance for parole coming in the distant future. But the truly tragic note here is about his mother, Jackie, as she bought her son that iMac that he so clearly loved, and she did so in the hopes that it would bring some much-needed happiness during such a tough time in his life. How could she have known that in reality, Daniel would turn around and use that very computer to plan and eventually carry out her very own murder? I want to give a huge thank you.
I think that, what was her name, Jackie, would be the first to yell, "Fuck them kids." That was some stories today. That was a lot. We've been going 2+ hours. That's a long time for me. Lots of other people talking, me not doing the heavy work. Thank you, whatever your name is, and Mr. Ballin. That was very helpful. Appreciate if you showed up and you were watching the view today. I really do appreciate it. I love each and every one of you. I hope you have a wonderful Saturday. And I'm going to go, I think, take the girls to the bookstore. So with that, I love you. Namaste. And have a fantastic weekend.